California's high-speed rail project has been a slow-moving saga, and public frustration is entirely justified. At the current pace of just 3.5 miles per year, out of an 800-mile planned route from San Francisco to Los Angeles, simple math suggests that completion would take over 200 years. It's a slow-motion train wreck. The California High-Speed Rail Authority, CHSRA, originally promised in 2008 to complete the San Francisco to Los Angeles route by 2020, with a budget of $33 billion and a travel time of under 3 hours. Fast forward to today, the cost has skyrocketed to between $106 billion and $128 billion, and only about 100 miles of the planned 800-mile route is under construction. So far, $13 billion has been spent, $10.5 billion from state funds and $6.8 billion in federal grants. The actual result? Just a 171-mile stretch from Merced to Bakersfield, expected to be completed by 2030-2033 at a cost of $35 billion, over $200 million per mile. What could the Trump administration do? Trump has been a vocal critic of the project, calling it the worst managed project he's ever seen, and even exaggerating the cost overruns to hundreds of billions of dollars. While that may be an overstatement, his criticism is not unfounded. During his first term, he revoked $929 million in federal grants, which Biden restored in 2021, along with an additional $3.3 billion in 2023. Currently, $4.3 billion in federal funds remains unspent. In February 2025, Trump's team, led by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, launched a compliance review specifically targeting Biden's $4 billion commitment to the project. Here's how they might act. 1. Pulling federal funding. Duffy has hinted that they may reclaim this $4 billion, including the previously contested $929 million from 2010 and the $3.3 billion from Biden's 2023 infrastructure bill. The Federal Railroad Administration, FRA, is investigating whether CHSRA is meeting funding requirements. If they find violations, such as missed deadlines or project scope changes, like delaying the San Francisco to Los Angeles section, the federal government could have legal grounds to cancel the funds. Trump did this before, and he might do it again. 2. Redirecting the funds. Duffy has suggested that this money could be diverted to more worthwhile projects, such as highways, bridges, or even Brightline West, a privately funded high-speed rail line between Las Vegas and Southern California, which Trump has spoken positively about. It received $3 billion in funding under Biden. This aligns with Trump's common-sense reform approach, cutting waste and prioritizing effective projects. If the FRA determines that CHSRA has failed to make reasonable progress, Trump's administration could justify reallocating the funds. 3. Forcing California to cover the costs alone. Trump's statement that the San Francisco to Los Angeles high-speed rail is never happening, and the funding termination bill pushed by Republican ally Kevin Kiley suggest a strategy of letting the project collapse. Without federal funding, California would face a $100 billion funding gap and would have to rely on state funds or private investment, neither of which are promising. Sacramento is facing a budget crunch, and private investors have shown little interest. Governor Gavin Newsom remains defiant, but without federal support, the Merced to Bakersfield segment might be all that's left. 4. Using DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, may push for a deeper investigation. Musk has mocked the California high-speed rail project, saying it has spent billions and built almost nothing. DOGE has already criticized the $6.8 billion in federal funds allocated to the project on X, formerly Twitter. They may push for a large-scale audit or recommend terminating the project as a case study in government waste. However, Trump has clarified that Musk will not be directly involved in reviewing the rail project. Meanwhile, California and Governor Gavin Newsom are unlikely to sit idly by. Ian Choudhry of CHSRA has welcomed the review, insisting that every dollar is accounted for. Newsom has called it political retaliation and may file another lawsuit, just like in 2019 when California won. At a press conference in Los Angeles, Protesters chanted "Build the Rail," while labor unions and transportation groups urged Trump to support the project as a job-creating engine. Moreover, with $13 billion already spent, abandoning the project now would be a massive sunk cost. So why has the project burned through $13 billion and counting while laying so little track? The money hasn't vanished. It simply hasn't been effectively used for actual construction. The main reasons include skyrocketing administrative costs, constant design changes, and severe mismanagement. Administrative bloat. Estimates suggest that 40% of the budget has gone to non-construction expenses, consulting fees, lawsuits, and bureaucratic overhead. CHSRA's financial reports show that over $4 billion was spent on preliminary planning, mostly on studies rather than track construction. Contractor delays and cost overruns. Take Tudor Perini. The contractor awarded a $1.2 billion contract for the first 29-mile segment. Construction began before all land was secured, leading to delays and costly project changes. The project succeeded politically because it rode a wave of optimism, environmental enthusiasm, and strategic marketing, while downplaying its risks. In November 2008, California voters approved Proposition 1A with 52.7% support, authorizing $995 billion in bonds to launch the $33 billion San Francisco to Los Angeles high-speed rail project. The late 2000s saw peak concerns over climate change. With gas prices at $4.50 per gallon and Al Gore's documentary An Inconvenient Truth dominating public discourse, the project was sold as California's eco-friendly marvel, reducing car and air travel to cut carbon emissions. The economic crisis of 2008 fueled the job creation argument. With 7% unemployment, the project was pitched as a way to generate thousands of jobs and stimulate economic growth. The $33 billion budget and 2020 completion date seemed feasible, only because CHSRA deliberately underestimated costs. In 2008, the California Legislative Analyst's Office warned that real costs could exceed $65 billion, and the timeline was too optimistic. But those warnings were buried under a massive PR campaign. Proposition 1A required federal and private matching funds, but in reality, no clear funding plan existed. California's high-speed rail wasn't born overnight. It has deep political roots. One key figure is Quentin Kopp, often called the godfather of high-speed rail. Kopp, a former state senator and judge, chaired the Senate Transportation Committee in the 1980s. Inspired by Japan's Shinkansen, he led efforts to study California's high-speed rail feasibility and founded CHSRA in 1996 as its first chairman. Other major political players included Arnold Schwarzenegger, who approved the 2008 ballot measure, Jerry Brown, who championed the project as a centerpiece of his administration, channeling $10 billion in cap-and-trade funds to keep it afloat, and Jeff Morales, who led CHSRA's push to sell the plan to voters. What's next? The FRA's review is expected in the coming months, determining whether the $4 billion in federal funds will remain or be revoked. Trump's team is likely to expedite the process, as he promised a swift investigation in February 2025. If federal funding is pulled, California may be forced to rely on state funds, seek private investors, or admit defeat. This battle is shaping up to be California's extravagant green dream versus Trump's fiscal axe.